All right, so let's expand on our photo sharing application a little bit and solve a rather pesky little problem you might have seen me playing with briefly at the beginning of the previous lesson, and that is what happens if our albums folder has something that's not a directory. Let's say I have a file called info.txt here. Currently, my code is going to list anything in this folder and is going to say, well, that's an album, including this info text. So if I go here and I run the simple JSON server, and then I say curl-i-sx get, like that, you'll see info text is listed as an album, which is not quite what we want. What we'd like to do is we'd like to modify our server here in the load album list function to say only include files in this. Let's not include and only include folders. Let's not include any files. So I'm going to do the read dir again. I'm going to say if error, callback error, because we don't want anything bad. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's actually do it this way, it's shorter. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an output array, var dirs only equals that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate over everything in this file list that the read dir function gives us. And I'm going to say I is less than file list.length, I plus plus. Oops. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stat function on the file system module. And what that does is it takes a path, looks at the file, and then gives you some information about it. So I'm going to say, look in the albums folder and file list I, and then add the name of the item that's in the file list, get the statistics for it, and call our function when you've got them. So if there is an error, then we can just call back and be done with it. Otherwise, we've got some valid data here, so we're going to say, well, if stats is directory, then we can add it to the dirs only object, file list I, like that. Otherwise, we don't worry about it and we don't want it. So after we've got all the stats, then we want to say callback null dirs only, like that. Okay, so our goal is we're going to loop over all of the elements that read dirs has given us. We're going to call the stat function and then have that callback function check if it's a directory and then push it to a list of only directories when we run it. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to restart my server, and then I'm going to say curl, and you'll see I got a 200, okay, and wait a minute, I have absolutely no albums whatsoever. So something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. And the problem is that our loop here is really not set up for asynchronous programming at all. I'm going into the load album list here function. I'm asynchronously calling read directory, this read dir, and then when it gets the list from into the callback function, it is then going over each of the items in the list and calling stat. Now, stat is an asynchronous function, and it is going ahead and calling a function itself, a callback, when it's finished doing its work. So basically what I'm doing here is, for each element in the file list, I'm calling the stat function, I'm pushing an event onto the node event queue, and then as soon as all of those are pushed, I'm immediately calling back the parent callback function with the dirs only, which is going to be empty. So what I want to do is I actually want somehow to iterate over every element in this list asynchronously and not have this be called until all of the callbacks have been successfully returned. And the easiest way we're going to do that is by using recursion. And so if you've never programmed recursively before, take a moment now to look it up on Wikipedia or your favorite computer science programming book or something like that. But the basic pattern we're going to use, as I've helpfully written it down here, is if we have an array and we want to have sort of modify it or filter it and have a results array, we're going to create an anonymous function here in JavaScript. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a function that iterates over things, and it's given an index. Now, if this index is past the last element in the array, that means we're done and we can pass back to the callback the resulting output array. If it is not the last one, then what we can do is we can do our asynchronous work then we can get the results of that asynchronous work. And then if the results were good, push whatever we want from that, and then continue to recursively call this iterator with the next element in the list. Once we have created and written this whole function, the very first thing we do is we immediately call it with the element 0. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to replace this loop with function iterator, like that, and then I'm going to immediately call it with 0. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if I greater than or equal to file list.length, that means we're done, so I can just directly call the callback. Here, this callback, I can just directly call it with no error and deers only. Now, if it's not the last one, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the asynchronous work here. I'm going to call the fs_stat. If there's an error, I'm still going to abort and call the callback. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it here onto that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say iterator I plus 1, like that. So I have my initial condition is 0. I go ahead and check. If it's not the last one in, go ahead and stat. If it's a directory, push it to deers only, and then just continue iterating through recursively until I get to the last element in it. Then I call my callback with the resulting list of only directories, and I have now fixed my looping problem. So node simple, and now there you go. You'll see I've got my albums list back, and now I've filtered out things that are not directories. So that's a cool node pattern. You'll see it quite a lot. This is combining asynchronous programming and looping. This is kind of the common way to do it. In lesson 5, I'll actually show you a cooler and more modern way of doing it that we'll be using after that in all of our programs. But this is sort of the core pattern that everybody follows for it.